Добар ден, ова е неделното интервју на Радио Слободна Европа. Наш денешен гостин, британскиот амбасадор во Република Македонија, Кристофер Ивон. Ваша екселенцијо, во каква атмосфера според вас се одвива кампањата за локалните избори?
In terms of the atmosphere for local elections, there is no real scientific measurement of an atmosphere at such times. I talk to people as I travel around the country. They seem very interested, very enthusiastic, very passionate. And I think that passion is important in local elections. I've seen it in other countries where people get very interested in local issues, schools, hospitals, jobs. And where I see that, I think that is exactly what the campaigning and the democratic life of local elections is really all about. I've also heard some rhetoric that has been personalised and perhaps controversial as well. And I think that shows the darker side of electoral campaigning. But you see that in, of course, local elections in many different countries. Where I've been really pleased, actually, is some of the positive behaviour that's happened, where there is a focus on local issues and where people have thought about their behaviour, their conduct in the run-up to local elections. So I've heard of many mayors who have signed a code of conduct, which is supported under a project by the British Embassy, to think very much about having a real decent contribution to fair elections. And I think that that's only to be commended. And I hope that we'll see other people sign that code of conduct too.
Имавме непријатни слики низ улиците во изминативе седмици. Како ги оценувате меѓуетничките односи во земјава во овој момент?
Well, I think the scenes that we saw on our television screens a week or two ago certainly were quite ugly. And I was personally very disturbed to hear of incidents around schools, on buses, isolated incidents, and then also, of course, the scenes that we saw of the protests, which I think were very disturbing. And I think more generally, it creates an atmosphere of fear amongst the wider community. And I know people who were unintentionally caught up on the margins of the protests with their children. They were very frightened about the situation. So I'm hoping that since then, the calls from political leaders, from figures in the international community, but also the community in Macedonia, will be observed, because I think local elections are much more about the local issues than around other issues importing themselves into the debate.
Што треба да се направи за смирување на страстите? Мислите ли дека политичките лидери прават доволно во таа насока?
Well, I think the fact that the protests that we've seen have not been repeated in the same intensity, and that there has been an observable reduction in the frequency of protests as well, even with a couple of protests, I think, being cancelled. I think that's a sign that people's fear is having an effect, in that no one wants that negativity. People do want to respond in a more productive and constructive way. And I hope that that continues up to the days of the elections themselves.
Зошто според вас Европската унија најде за неопходно да интервенира во смирување на несогласувањата помеѓу власта и опозицијата кои што настана непосредно пред локалните избори?
Well, I think there are two things around the commissioner's interest in Macedonia. I think one is very much the Commission has been mandated to produce a report, and that will be provided to Member States. That will look at three areas: steps taken towards a solution on the name issue, EU reforms under the high-level accession dialogue, and good neighbourly relations. So the Commissioner personally has a very deep interest in ensuring that his report is as accurate and reflective as possible. In addition to that, I think when we saw the recent weeks up to the 1st of March, the political situation, I think, was giving the international community real cause for concern. And you would have to ask Commissioner Füle for an exact answer, but I suspect his willingness to come here was to see progress for Macedonia on the EU track, but also to be able to explain what the consequences would be if some kind of solution to the political situation could not be found, so that leaders were making informed decisions and informed choices. And I welcome the fact that they, together, the political leaders, reached an agreement on the 1st of March.
Дали тоа значи дека политичките лидери во земјава во последниот период беа немокни да ги разрешат несогласувањата меѓу себе и со тоа да создадат позитивна политичка клима во земјата?
Well, I think the political leaders have together reached an agreement, and that has to be welcomed. We had a period of uncertainty at the beginning of the year, and I think we can only welcome and commend that they themselves reached an agreement. So that shows a level of responsibility that we can only welcome. What we'll have to see now is how the local elections are conducted. We very much hope that they are as fair as possible and that they're well administered, to pick a phrase from the last parliamentary elections. And we have every hope that the elections will run smoothly, be a credit to Macedonia. And I think that reputational aspect is really important. Like the code of conduct that we're supporting, the slogan is Kakov Beleg Kir Stafibe. What mark will we leave? That is a mark in terms of individuals who are voting, and their families and communities in the municipalities. It is a mark regionally, because other countries will be looking at how the elections in Macedonia are conducted, and a mark internationally, because the international community will want to see elections that are a source of pride for Macedonia rather than a cause for concern.
Сметате ли дека во овој момент политичката состојба во земјава е доведена до едно задоволително ниво за добивање позитивен извештај од Европската комисија и евентуално добивање датум за преговори во јуни?
I think it's too early to speculate on what might be expected in June, because the report that the Commission has been mandated to write has not been written yet. At least that's my understanding. United Kingdom is not writing it, so we don't have a privileged view of the process of it being written. We will have to see what that report says. And I think the fundamental issue comes back to those three aspects set out in December at the European Council around steps towards solving the name issue, progress on good neighbourly relations, and EU reforms. And after the 1st of March, when the agreement was reached between political leaders, I think that cleared away a very large distraction from efforts on those three areas. So I hope now we see acceleration, a real step change in efforts in those three areas.
Вие знаете дека и по заминувањето на Европската тројка од Скопје, власти и опозицијата продолжија да се препукуваат околу тоа дали биле или не биле договорени предвремени парламентарни избори. Потребни ли се сега дополнителни толкувања на договореното?
Well, there are lots of things in the agreement, and I don't think we should lose sight of those. The political leaders agreed to have a common statement, a memorandum of understanding or a parliamentary resolution that reaffirmed the united perspective towards the EU Atlantic aspiration, and that's an important part. There was also an agreement on a commission of inquiry. So the agreement is not only about one particular aspect. Now the wording of the agreement, as I understand it, is actually fairly clear. It makes clear that discussions will continue in good faith, on all options, without prejudice, on defining the timing of the next parliamentary elections. So that discussion is expected to take place immediately after the local elections, and it will be for the political leaders to have that discussion then. So if there are interpretations of that agreement that differ from that clear wording, then you would need to ask the people making those interpretations. But my own interpretation of it is crystal clear.
Ви благодарам за разговорот.
Thank you very much.
Го гледавте неделното интервју на Радио Слободна Европа. Се гледаме за 7 дена.